you're not expecting that, then you're in the wrong place.
So this is actually partially a presentation of a suggestion of how we can be more effective at UDS and throughout the cycle. I'm going to try and get my laptop hooked up to this without the battery running out. So. Look at that. Okay. A laptop, projector, and a cup of coffee. All right. So the problem that we've got. Who's been to UDS before in the room? Yeah. So you'll all be familiar with the fact that we get together in sessions, we're all really excited, right? And we say, okay, we'd like to do something, we'd like to do a specific thing. So we'd like to, we'd like to build a piece of software, we'd like to improve how one of our governance bodies works or how one of our community teams works. And we get together and we sit in a session and we come up with lots of ideas, loads of ideas. And then we get to the next UDS and we say, well, didn't really have as much time as I expected, and we basically have a ton of ideas and we often don't get through them. And I think part of the reason for that is because we don't really document them and agree on what's actually doable for a cycle, given all the other stuff. We also see themes where a community member will come to UDS and say, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do this. And what we do is we end up seeing a ton of commitment, and often a lot of it doesn't get through. Another problem that we have is that we actually often come up with ideas, but we don't actually document them. So we just say, did we say that at UDS? Was that what we agreed to do? So the whole point of UDS is that we get the most out of our face time, and then it fleshes out the next cycle. So I wanted to talk about some roadmap planning which I've been putting in place, which I think will be useful. So, so basically how this is actually how I manage my team. So, as David and Daniel and George will testify, at the beginning of a cycle what we do is we want to build a roadmap of what we want to achieve. So we've just done this for the 1004 cycle. And what we do is we say, here's a set of objectives that we want to make, and when you see it all together, it gives a good idea of saying, is this actually possible? And I'd like us to encourage this kind of ethos with our local teams and with our community teams and elsewhere. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So, the goal here is just for us to document what we're all agreeing on and lower to the least level of bureaucracy possible. We all hate bureaucracy. We all hate to-do lists. We all hate any kind of planning. And we just hate maintaining documents, right? So the goal here is to try and keep this as want this to be as sleek as possible. And we don't want people to have to necessarily worry too much about these documents. So I'm just going to demo how this works. The people who are on IRC, I'm going to wiki.ubuntu.com/roadmaps. And I'll tell you what I'm doing so you can follow along as well. So basically what we've got is this page basically explains how you create roadmaps. It basically works like this. And this is quite recent, so there's no roadmaps in there yet. You'll see that there's a link here for Ubuntu 10.04 Lucid Links. And in there, we will list pages. We'll list roadmaps for each team. So, for example, you'll have an entry in there which might be Ubuntu UK Loco team, or you might have Ubuntu Loco directory development. And each roadmap will contain a series of blocks. Now, we actually just had a session about the Loco directory, and I haven't created the roadmap yet, so this is a good opportunity to show you how this is going to work. So what we'll do I'm just going to load a Gobby. So this is the last session that we had. So it started out like many sessions, right? We had loads of ideas. The local directory, right? The local directory, which is this. It's basically a list of loco teams, right? And you can click on a loco team. So, for example, Ubuntu UK, see some information in there. We added some data to the Irish loco team. So here, it's on Daniel's local copy. So this basically lists information. We want to improve this. We want to add more stuff to it. So we talked it through, and we come up with some notes, and we're like, yeah, we could do events, we could have mug shots, we could have all kinds of cool stuff in there. And we started doing what we do every UDS, which is coming up with loads of ideas, which will take 2 years to develop. Because we're all, most of us we've got tons of stuff going on, and many of us are volunteers. So we instead agreed that the first thing is the visual design of each page, and this is a roadmap item that I'm talking about. So I'm going to create the roadmap, and then I'll explain what this means. So first things first, I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to create an entry here, which is going to be roadmaps loco directory. And then I'm going to put in loco directory. So we've got a link there. Save that. Eventually.
With you.
This gives us all a good opportunity to just think about where we sit. I guess UDS is going on right now, so let me copy this. Okay, so now I've got this page here, right? Oh, hang on, I've made an error. Oh no, hang on. No, I haven't. Okay. Okay, so I've created it. Now you'll notice in the link, so we've got wiki.ubuntu.com/roadmaps/lucid. That's where basically all of the lucid roadmaps will live. These are things that we're planning on doing for the next cycle. And then I've added a team name to the right of that. So now we're at wiki.ubuntu.com/roadmaps/lucid/local directory. Okay? This is where we're going to document what we're going to work on.
It's not under Lucid.
Huh?
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I've moved it. It wasn't there. Yeah, I was saving the page. So I'm going to create an empty page here. I'm going to create a new page here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this content that we agreed on, and then I'll go through the structure and explain how it works. So, paste that there. Loco. Lucid. Okay. So for the folks on IRC, if you go to wiki.ubuntu.com/roadmaps, click on the Lucid link at the bottom, and then you'll see the local directories in there. And then you should be able to click on the page in a second. It's just loading. The reads are much quicker than the writes. Okay, so this is now our roadmap so far. So the whole point of this page is that it only includes things that we're committing to in the cycle. Okay? So this is how it works. So the first thing is an objective. So the objective basically says what we want to do. This is what our goal is. The objective is saying improve the visual design of a local directory team page. it's specific. It says a very specific thing which we'd like to do. The success criteria is how we judge whether we were successful or not with it. Now, you've got to try and be, the whole point of the success criteria is to be as specific as possible. And to be able to basically have a binary yes or no. Some things it's harder, because we're proven visual design, it's hard to choose a success criteria out in there. But the goal here is an enjoyable experience that teams are happy to point new users to. We want to be able to go up to any loco, any new person who's interested in the loco team and say, you want to join the Ubuntu UK loco team? Go to loco.ubuntu.com and click on the Ubuntu UK team, and it'll have everything you need to look at. Okay? That's basically the outcome that we're seeking. So that's the goal, is to improve the visual design, and that's our success criteria. Now this is the key thing. This is where we agree on specific things that we're going to focus on in the cycle. And the key thing is the cycle. It's very tempting to think, yeah, I'll do something that spans beyond the cycle. But we really want to chunk this down into work items for the coming cycle. So we talked about some very specific things, and people coming up with ideas. And when we're in the session, we're like saying, so are you happy to do that? So Martin Owens said, I'd like to, for example, you've got branding if you upload a logo to Launchpad for a logo team. We want to suck that into the logo directory and have that available on the page. And Martin Owens said, well, I've written code to do that. And there's actually a bug open already. So we added that as an action, and he's committed to doing that, and also there's a bug listed there. We also said, we'd like to have better icons in there. Martin also is very happy to do this, was happy to do that, and also some CSS improvements in terms of spacing the page out a little bit more, a little bit padding. So he's basically committed to those three things in the coming cycle. The other thing was for administrators on each page. So if you look at, for example, the Ubuntu Ireland page, you've got these owners and admins. One thing that we were saying would be really nice is if you had a mugshot of each of the admins. So you go to UDS and you think, I'd like to meet one of the Ubuntu Ireland admins if they're here, and then they're listed. So it means that it's easy to spot people at events. So those were the key things that we thought that's doable in the next cycle. Dave Walker, Davey, basically said, I've written some code to do that, I'm happy to contribute to that. So those are the things that we've agreed on. The person who's driving this project is Martin. Martin said, I'll have oversight and make sure that everyone's doing what they need to do. So at this point, we've got a benefit that we haven't had at previous UDSs. At previous UDSs, we had this cloud of ideas hovering up above our heads. Now what we've got is a set of agreements that we're saying we're going to do in this cycle. And not only does this give us a better idea of who's working on what, but also it means that when you get to the next UDS, or you get to the end of the cycle and you've crossed these items off, you think, yeah, we've really achieved something. It gives you a better sense of we've done something really cool. So the thing here as well is we've got a spec. We recommend that with every project you run it through a blueprint. So I created this blueprint, which is basically tracking the progress on what we're doing in the cycle. Is anyone here unfamiliar with blueprints? Anyone not really used them before?
You mark the blueprint as succeeded in the release or done in the release when you have your specific criteria met.
Yeah.
And then we have an automated list of all the
what we've done.
roadmaps.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's some hidden benefits to having a roadmap like this. First of all, it helps the team understand what's going on. But the other thing is that one of the kind of classical rules of project management is that if you go up to someone in a room and you say, are you happy to do this? And say, yeah, all right. They do at that point in time agree to work on what you're doing. The thing is that it's likely, unless it's written down, that they'll let it slide. They'll have other stuff come up. Whereas one thing a lot of project management books say is that when you have a shared document that everyone looks at, and people have written down they're committing to doing something, there's a much higher opportunity of success in them following through with that. So that's a really key thing as well, is that you can really, Martin and Dave have said, I'm going to commit to this, and I'm writing down that I'm committing to this in a document that we're all looking at regarding this work. And that in itself, in most project scenarios, project management scenarios, will actually improve the likelihood of success of the project. And that's what we're here to do, right? The other benefit here is that if we get partway through the cycle and we realise that, the admin mug shots have not got in, It may be because Dave Walker's just had a kid, right? And, you know, he's dealing with nappies and baby food and no sleep at night. So if we get partway through the cycle and that feature, which we've all agreed on, is not tended to appear, someone can go up to Dave and say, is everything all right? Can I help out? You know, so that's another thing that we can do. The other major benefit of this is that every team generally has meetings. So these include loco teams, they include software development projects, and at every meeting you now have something to review. So in previous meetings, like the loco council are an example, loco council would say we'd have meetings and we'd talk about approvals, but sometimes we'd run out of things to talk about because there wasn't really anything to discuss. So the benefit of this is that, you know, we now have a point of contact for content for the meeting as well. So someone can go into the meeting and say, okay, let's review the roadmap, how we're doing. And then imagine you're having a meeting about this. Maybe Dave says, well, you know what, I haven't slept for about 3 months, and you know, I have a new appreciation of Sesame Street, and I'm struggling to get this admin mugshot code written. Maybe somebody else, maybe if Martin's plowed through those things, or Opie, or somebody else says, you know what, I'll help out and I'll take over that item. So it helps socialise problems that are going on in the project as well. And that's basically it. That's basically how it works. So in a nutshell, at UDS, I'm trying to really socialise across UDS the idea that we talk about things and we really zone them into whether we can achieve them in a cycle. If we can, we document them and put them into this structure. And then this provides us with an agreement on what we can work on throughout the rest of the cycle. So the roadmap goal is there. The blueprint is a good way of people tracking progress. So with the blueprint, people can subscribe to it, and we'll track progress in the blueprint of how well we're getting on there. So the way I'm recommending that we'll do it is that we use the whiteboard. So as an example, what I can do is I can say, we now have this page. So I'm going to add to the whiteboard. Roadmap is documented at this location. And then what we'll do is we'll track progress on how we've gone through the roadmap here. So subscribers who are interested in the project can keep up to date with it. So as an example, the boot experience team did this, and what they did is they basically said, these are the to-do items, and then as each one was crossed off, they clicked on it. And anyone who's interested in that project but doesn't want to delve into the details can just be abreast of it. And that's basically it. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. And does anyone have any questions or anything you wanted to say?
Well, I've got a question. What you're sort of describing here is, in Scrum terms, it's like a selective backlog.
Right.
So I just wondered if it might be an idea or a nice idea if you had like the whole product backlog, like you had the whole the meta view for what you want to happen with the local teams, and then you're selecting these items for this selective backlog. Because I think what the problem might be here is you become very focused on what's happening in the 6-month cycle.
Yeah.
But you're losing focus of what the whole vision is for the whole thing.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think it is definitely a problem. So I'm just going to repeat it for people who are on IRC. So the point is that one of the problems with this approach is that it zones into a 6-month cycle, and it might lose sight of the next 2-3 years of what we're doing. And I agree. To be honest with you, I think it's actually, that is part of the goal, is to really zone us into thinking about a cycle. Because sometimes people will come to a project and say, wouldn't it be cool to have this feature? And it's actually going to take 2 years to develop. So the way I'd recommend we do that is to document the awareness of the feature, maybe at the top of the roadmap, but then to chunk down what you're going to do in the first, quarter of the work. The first 6 months of the 2-year project is saying we're going to do this, and then it gives everyone oversight on what they can do.
And the second question is, what statistics can I draw from this? Like if I want to see which are completed, which are in work in progress, or
right.
So there's functionality in Launchpad to see all the blueprints that have been assigned to a particular release and see which ones that Mark has implemented. And so, like, towards the end of the release or halfway through, we could say, like, oh, here's what Lucid has, and it'll have a bunch of software-related blueprints, but maybe these other sorts of things as well.
Yeah. So with blueprints, what we can do, you can see who the approver is, who the drafter is, who the assignee is. You can also set it to a milestone. So we'll set the milestone at the end of the cycle. The benefit of this is that, so imagine you're thinking, you know what, I'm interested in what's going on with the local directory, but I don't really want to dig into the details. I just want to see how the project's going on. Kind of just what I'm assuming you're saying. That means you can just subscribe to this blueprint, and you'll get an email whenever the status changes. And we've had this great functionality in Launchpad for a long time, but like a fraction of our community uses it. And I'm the biggest offender, the worst offender in many ways, because I traditionally never really used blueprints very much. You know, I tracked my team on wiki pages and Tomboy notes and whatever else. So I think that this actually will increase transparency in the community. The benefit of part of the reason why I've set up this namespace is that you'll be able to go to Lucid here. You'll be able to go to this page and say, look, there's another one. You'll be able to come here and say, these are all of the plans for the next cycle, and they'll all use the same structure. They'll all use this template, and then it means that it's an easy way of socializing the concept of, you know, everyone will begin to understand what success criteria, what objective means, but then to keep up on status, you just subtract the blueprint. So each one of these should have a blueprint, in a nutshell.
So, Jono, my suggestion is this page right here, which is kind of blank, needs to explain a bit about using the Launchpad blueprints and why to do it the way you just did.
So maybe we should. So we got a template. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure I don't lose your point. We got. John nearly spills coffee all over himself. So maybe in here, you say how to create a roadmap. We should add that there.
Yeah. So in tradition, name someone and volunteer for it.
Sure. So we should have a. We got a spec. Do we have a? I don't think I registered a spec for this session because it's more of an information session. Let me just check.
Well, I have a Gubby document.
Could you note that down in the Gubby document for a sec?
Yeah, you need to update the roadmaps wiki page to explain the blueprints.
Oh, no, I did.
Okay. Set the URL.
Okay, so
was you trying to create this already, but I Gubby document in that. Oh, yeah. That's the one.
okay, so so do you want to do that?
Oh, I want to do that. Okay, fine.
You should know by now that suggesting something means that you automatically get assigned to that. So we should do that, and maybe we should explain the workflow that you were talking about keeping up to date. So just going to note down, explain, document how to have observers keep up to date with blueprints. So I'll do that. Does anyone else have any comments or suggestions or queries?
Sorry, can you get back to the sample one? The wiki that we have?
Sure.
So, yeah, eventually you're going to have like a whole bunch of these.
Yeah.
Is there any way to see a roll up on a per person basis of what they've signed up for in terms of what, so that then I can say, okay, here's the 10 things that I've said I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea. I think that's something that we can like good to head towards.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about this a bit in the past, of like having a to-do list. So something I've been thinking about recently on that note is I have this burning desire inside me to have a client application on Ubuntu that is basically like a control center dashboard for the community. And I've sat down with a piece of paper and a pen loads of times thinking, all right, let's do this. But I haven't been able to think of a reason why we need it other than I just want to write an IGT application that basically makes life easier. But I think that would be a good use of that, you know. So basically we have this roadmap infrastructure, and then people can add an action item to it, and then they can maybe keep track of it. I think the problem with it, the challenge with it, is that I bet if I was to ask everyone in this room how you deal with your to-do list, we all do it differently. Like, some people use Remember the Milk, some people use Evolution, some people use like formalized list software like that. I use a Tomboy note because I like moving text around. So we use text files. So that's the challenge. But I think it would be really cool to maybe for us to think about how we could do that. But right now it doesn't really. It's not that granular. Any other comments or questions? Or it looks like we've got the Minnesota team here. Rocking and rolling. So, what I'm expecting is that it's going to take a couple of cycles for people to get used to it. The first time I heard about this approach, I was like, that sounds like a world of pain to me. I don't want anything to do with it. And there's only two people who were less into the idea than I was, and that was Daniel Horvath and George Casper. And then I started putting it in place. Fortunately, David came into this world of pain already, or conceived world of pain. But it's actually been really effective for the team, because it means that I can have oversight over what the guys are working on. And also they can, like when you have a manager, in a traditional management scenario, the worst situation you can be in is where your manager is expecting more of you than you're going to provide. So it means that, for example, with David's translations work, he can say, this is what I'm going to do, this is what you should expect from me in the next 6 months. And you're not allowed to get angry with me. You're not allowed to get angry with me if you're expecting more. So, in a community scenario, I think it just helps visibility, helps us all coordinate on projects better, because we don't have managers in the community.
What about using this like for the likes of Amber's logo? There isn't a room yet.
Okay.
So for keeping track of the for a logo to become an approved logo.
Yeah.
That's our roadmap. And then you can kind of link this up then with the likes of the local directory so that you can link to your blueprint.
Totally. So just for IRC friends, the question from Laura was, what about for loco teams, such as unapproved new loco teams that aren't approved yet? Would it be
a release cycle would fall under their target of to become an approved logo?
Yeah. So could this be used to help them become an approved logo? It's traditionally these kinds of project management approaches are actually, they tend to be applied to software. Whereas I think it's really, really useful for logo teams. Like, this could be awesome for logo teams. So imagine this is a scenario. A logo team, they're brand new, and they're like, what do we want to do? And the hardest thing with the logo team is they form, and then typically, you see the same kind of template happen with a lot of logo teams. They get together, they get really excited about spreading the Ubuntu love in their local area. They're really excited, like, yeah, this is going to be really cool, we're going to meet new friends and all the rest of it. And then they think we need a website. So they then have to find some hosting somewhere, and then they spend a month having an argument about which content management system to use. And the team doesn't really form. And if they get to the point where they have a CMS and they have a website, then what should we put on the website? And there's the usual kind of contact information. But at that point, the team then says, all right, well, we'll wait for someone to tell us what to do. And sometimes the team never decides what to do, and then people lose interest and wander off and get bored, and that's a shame. So the benefit of this approach is what it does is that when a team forms, using Amber as an example, right? So Amber's really passionate about her logo team. Amber says, I'd love to do this. I'd love to organise an event, as an example. I'd like us to exhibit at a given conference. So you develop this kind of plan. So maybe using the template, the objective could be representing Ubuntu at Atlanta Linux Fest. And then the success criteria is, people are exposed to Ubuntu at Atlanta Linux Fest, and a positive message is received. And then the actions are things like talking to the event organisers, securing booth space, arranging for machines to be available, providing maybe a wireless access point if it's necessary, getting stuff printed. The kind of things that are all involved in organising a table at a booth. You can then break it down, you can assign it to people. So then everyone's clear on what they need to do for everything to come together. And the benefit of this is that when you go for approval, the one thing the Logo Council really looks for is that you're basically being organised and planning for success. Because the whole point of logo team is to be successful, right? So the whole point of this is to basically, this demonstrates that the logo team is organized and is doing good work. And then what you can do is you can just go up to the logo council and say, as you know, when you write your page that justifies your approval, you just say, check out our roadmaps.
Well, then do you also...
Sorry, Adam, do you want to sit here so people can hear you?
Can you not hear her?
Yeah. You know, like people don't have trouble here.
I am surprised I have to ask you to.
Exactly.
It would not surprise me if the microphones can pick up people in the back of the room.
So, in the terms of an unapproved logo team, and you have your objective and your all this, is it worth then creating a blueprint for that roadmap? Because I know there's probably only like 2 or 3 people in my logo team that even know what the term blueprint is. But it's worth educating and teaching people. Is it worth having a blueprint for that roadmap? Or is that overkill?
Yeah, I think so. The only thing I'd hesitate on right now is creating a blueprint to get approved. Because for me, and this is just a kind of I guess an ethical thing, but to me the purpose of logo team is not to get approved, it's to do good stuff. You just happen to get approved along the way. But yeah, a blueprint for, you know, a project, like a significant project, the logo team could be, like for example the Atlanta Linux Fest boothing, would be a great thing to do. So because as an example, I don't live in Atlanta, but I'd love to know how it's going. I'd subscribe to that blueprint, and then I get an email that says, you know what, Amber secured the space, and we're all good. You know what I'm saying?
Right, well, that was going to be my next thing, because if I could say, like, a successful logo team, like the Ireland team, and to see how they set up and to check their blueprint out and to see how their criteria is going, then we can say, oh, that's how they do that, so how should we, can we mirror that as well? So it may also serve as a guide for other logo teams.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing I'm really passionate about with this kind of initiative is that we identify some teams that maybe have struggled in the past at securing a sense of direction. You have them kind of get used to the idea. Like, if I can come away from UDS and 5-10 teams are starting to use this, and then we review it at the end of the cycle, I think it would be really helpful. And logo teams are a great opportunity there. I think the other thing is it gets people into a mental headspace of trying to bring it, without sounding patronising, a sense of reality in terms of when they agree to stuff, to say, you know what, because we're thinking about a cycle, it stops people kind of entering blue sky visionary mode where it's likely to take 2 years, and then people get the first 5% and then get bored because they feel overwhelmed by the project.
Well, if we need something during this cycle to see, like to test it, then I'll throw North Carolina in the mix, and we can see how it works with an unapproved logo team to follow it along and see how the progress goes for this cycle.
That'd be awesome. Because
we're new to both blueprints and how Launchpad works, and like new to the whole thing, so it would be a good kind of test to see how hard it is, how easy it is, where the barriers are versus.
So the other thing to remember about these roadmaps, one of the this is project management kind of law, I guess, as in LORE, is that sometimes people have a bit of a fire and forget approach to blueprints, to roadmaps. So they think, okay, I've got my roadmap. I've done that. We're all good to go. If you have a roadmap and it's just up there and you never reference it again, it defeats the purpose. At that point, it becomes bureaucracy, and we hate bureaucracy. So the key thing here is making sure that you regularly check it. And most teams, we generally recommend that most teams have meetings, I think it's once every couple of weeks or once a month. Make it part of your agenda to check in with the roadmap and see how you do it. So like when you get together with your logo team, just say, okay, how are we doing this? And look at each of your objectives.
I think it's easier to subscribe to a blueprint than it is to a wiki when people change those. Because if it's on the blueprint and it's on the whiteboard, and every time something changes and it's saved, if your team is subscribed, then everybody knows about it. Whereas if it's a wiki, people hate wikis, they forget about them.
Yeah. Well, the thing is as well, what I recommend with a blueprint is that significant progress is documented there. So you say, we've done this.
Right.
So actions are completed and objectives are completed. It's good to like put a to-do list of what you're doing and then do it. But you know what, in terms of how you handle progress, there's different approaches. Like some people will put a line through it, you know, on their roadmap. It depends what's comfortable for the team. You know, so the key thing is, I think, is making sure that you just spend some time. The first goal that I've got here is to just, and against the word socialize the concept of a plan. What I don't want to do is mandate on the community that you have to mark progress this way or that way, because then it's not dictatorship. You know, this is just a recommended approach to helping teams to be successful. You know. So if you want to mark progress on a blueprint or on a wiki page, whatever's comfortable for your team, go ahead and do so, but I'd recommend sticking with it.
I would like to share with you the experience of the Italian local team. We started using the blueprint for tracking the activities in the marketing team, and I'm pasting on a copy a URL if you show it.
Sure.
We prepare a lot of blueprint, and I think the best things of blueprint is that we can define the dependencies. So you can show, we go down. Okay, you can describe easily what to do first. Oh, okay, it's in Italian. Sorry, but for instance, the first ball on top is something like spread Ubuntu.
Yeah.
It's a project to prepare material. So without material, you can do a lot of things. So this is, I think, it is a powerful tool to display to newcomers what to do first and what. The things I think we should improve is to display in this graph the status. If a project is started or is accomplished, or because it just changed the color of the circle, so it's not easy to visualize.
Yeah.
You have to. By the way, I think it's a powerful tool. I suggest to everybody.
Absolutely, and it's a much underused tool as well. A lot of people don't use this. So, yeah. Blueprints are really powerful, you know, there's a lot we can do with them, and they're just great ways of having oversight of the project. And it's good for just keeping up. So, I mean, the other thing, of course, about blueprints is that you can propose them for a sprint. So, for example, that's how we do it with UDS. And you can say, I've got this idea, let's propose it for specific things. So you can propose something for like an event, you want a sprint for yourselves. And then obviously you can set like, I mean, I can't edit this because I'm not a registrar, but you can set whether it's in a status of discussion or whether you've approved it, and that's all that kind of stuff. So, just looking at the schedule. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left. Well, about 10 minutes left. Does anyone else have any points or questions?
Yes, I have a point. Going back to the backlog idea of having, sometimes you discuss a lot of things on UDS that you cannot accomplish on one cycle. If you only document what you're going to do or what you think you're going to do, you're going to lose all the ideas.
Right. So one thing that may be useful to do is to solve this problem is you could conceivably have like a blueprint for an idea and then have other blueprints that fill in each chunk. So you could maybe say, okay, with the UDS we talk about the idea of, let's say a new software project, like my idea of a client for how to build a community. That's going to take a year to write. So you can maybe then take that and break it into, have a blueprint that covers the overriding goal, and then break it into chunks with each with a roadmap attached. I think that would be a good approach. Yeah. I think
I think there needs to be another one of these roadmaps for like with the overall goals, like 5-year roadmaps. Say like I don't know, maybe 5 years is too long, maybe 2 years, something like that. And then for each 6-month cycle, you select some items from this backlog that you would like to complete in the cycle. I think that would really work nicely. It's probably more difficult to write a 2-year cycle.
So yeah, I mean you could do that. I mean if there's a wide vision, for example UDS, I think it would be cool to just have a blueprint. I mean,
you don't have to have the blueprint tracked to a specific cycle. You can just have it floating in the Launchpad.
Yeah, you could have like an overview blueprint, which is your 5 years, and then break it into like other blueprints for what you're going to do for each cycle.
Well, it would also be enable you to have metrics of how you were performing over 6 months.
Yeah.
In each 6-month cycle, you could say, okay, well, we selected 6 items from the backlog, and we only managed to do 4, but the next one will be 5. So
yeah, totally. I mean, just to stress as well, this approach is not cast in stone. I mean, if teams don't want to do this, that's perfectly fine. This is a recommended approach that I found really useful, and I know other teams have found successful. So, and if people want to have like an overview that you're suggesting, I think that's great as well.
I think something else that's missing in this is some sort of a retrospective. Like after the 6-month cycle is done, like you have the roadmap. It's like, I don't know, maybe this already happens, I just don't know about it, but you get together and have something like a retrospective.
And discuss it.
What went well, what went badly, what could be improved in the future, what things need to improve from Canonical, what things do we need to improve in the local team, whatever.
I totally agree with you. I thought I documented that, maybe I didn't. But let me just go back.
And I think this needs to be documented in a really accessible place so that the whole team can see what was said.
Yeah.
So this I just did right there.
So we should just put it here. We should put it like we should add something here. Oh yeah, cool. So we should probably put in here like maybe we'll have a section on this page that is about progress and evaluation. So we'll have a section there.
Just had a question on IRC.
Question.
What about teams without a Launchpad project? Should the QA team use it?
So you don't have to have a Launchpad project to use this. You just need to access the wiki. I mean, you need a Launchpad app. You need a Launchpad account to use the wiki. I'd recommend that teams have a Launchpad project.
I was just asking a question.
Yeah. That's the answer. That's what I'd recommend. Launchpad's cool. I pushed my first PPA last night as well. So, yeah. Okay. So in terms of the checking in on progress, I'll take that action. It'll take 2 minutes to do. How's going on? My cat's lucky. All right. Great. That's pretty good, but that's great. All right, we've only got a few minutes left. Anything else? Any other questions? Anyone from IRC have anything you want to ask or discuss?
Is it exactly that?
This might be something that you want to implement or suggest to people to put on their membership applications, some sort of roadmap for what they're going to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So we should put here like reference and roadmaps elsewhere, membership applications and also the approval applications.
But when you're new, like when you're new to Ubuntu and you're new to the community and stuff, Launchpad is like this foreign entity that, like, it's not a natural flow when you're a non-technical end user, I should say.
Yeah, I mean it's.
I would encourage you to talk to the Launchpad team about that. Tell us what we can do to be better, because we're absolutely focused. We just spent the last week here talking about how we can make things better for people who don't know what the heck a Bazaar branch is and things like that. And we're really working on that, and it sucks and it's slow, and we know we have issues, but come to us and say this is terrible. And Stuart, I've gone out of my way. Stuart Langridge, he's an opinionated guy. He wrote this very long bug report that said what's wrong and how we can fix it. He went as far as to write a grease monkey script that would show us exactly how he wanted it to be. And I've gone out of my way because he made it so detailed and went, instead of just saying this is terrible, you should fix it. he told me what I could do to make it better, and so I've gone out of my way to do that. And I'd be happy if I have the power to do something like that. And I know that the Launchpad devs in general are like that. If you can say, it would be better if it was like this, and we can do that for you really easily, we'll do it immediately, or we'll schedule it in.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree. I think I think one thing that we sometimes lose sight of, particularly those of us who've been around these woods for a while, is that you kind of assume that people know how it works. And I think you raise a really valid point. And I don't think that's so much a problem with Launchpad, it's just that people haven't used Launchpad before. And things like screencasts are good for that kind of thing, I think, like showing people how to use it.
Right. After 7 months, I'm just now starting to touch Launchpad.
But I think part of it is that people think, you know what, the only people who use Launchpad are developers.
You're exactly right.
And that's part of the reason why I want to do this, is that like we have some great facilities in Launchpad to help logo teams be really successful. That kind of thing. So I mean, maybe that's something would be a good thing to if anyone there's some discussion on IC about that. Maybe some folks would be interested in helping to write some content that helps people get used to things, particularly maybe targeted at like logo teams. So cool. I think we're done. Thanks everyone.